training before they buy a firearm. And these manufacturers at long last will be required to act responsibly in the sale of these what can be public nuisances. These are three important bills. I do want to note that while we celebrate them, they're not the only things we need to do against gun violence. They are not a total panacea. But just because they don't solve all the problems does not mean that the state of Washington does not take action. Inaction against gun violence is unacceptable in the state of Washington. But we are also moving to make sure people have access to mental health and improving mental health access. We are moving in multiple ways. We are moving to provide more additional law enforcement officers that are well trained. And I'm happy the legislature has increased the criminal justice training system so we can have more officers on our streets. We are moving with prevention programs to help people prevent the causes of violence in our schools and in our streets. But these are three pivotal things. And I will just tell you, I saw folks with assault weapons and breaking through the governor's residence a year ago, but I'll tell you, we are not intimidated by the NRA. And I'm happy to say that. We are actually. Now, I want to thank all the people who've been involved in this effort. And there have been so many for now decades. Jim and Anne-Marie, who lost their daughter Carrie in Las Vegas. Pam Eakes, who helped establish the Mothers Against Violence. Mary Glenn, whose son Sean was killed by an assault weapon 30 years ago, and for 3 decades now has worked on this issue. And perhaps closest to my heart, Trudy Inslee, who stood beside me when I voted to ban assault weapons in 1994 and has been there every day against gun violence since then. I want to comment on that long journey that all these folks have been on that we're with today. And I think there's a cause to think about what we've done here in the state of Washington today that I think appropriately can inspire us in other missions, in other causes. And here's why I say that. Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And this has been a long journey. Trudy and I started in 1994. And that bill worked, by the way, because it reduced gun violence up to 70% reductions in mass murder while that bill was in practice. We know the safety training bill and the 10-day waiting period work. They effectively reduce gun violence. And we know that because they've worked in other states. So this has been a very long bending of the arc of the moral universe, but it does bend towards justice. And the victory we are celebrating today, I think, ought to be a victory for anyone involved in any long-term cause. Keep your head up. Keep your heart strong. Take inspiration for the people in this room who've really had another step forward for peace in the state of Washington. With that, I want to yield to a champion for a long time who's done a fantastic job as an Attorney General for the state of Washington, and that's Bob Ferguson. Bob.
Thank you so much, Governor, and I think we can all agree maybe the right place to start is by showing our appreciation for having a state with a governor and a first lady who, by the way, testified on the ban on the sale of assault weapons at this legislative session. But many things have to happen for bills like this to get across the finish line, but it obviously starts with the fact that you need to have a governor who's willing to lead on that and bring us all together for a bill signing. So thank you to you, Governor, and First Lady Trudy Inslee. Thank you so much. So I have a few thank yous to start with. And the road has been long, Governor. You are right about that. I first proposed the banning of the sale of assault weapons as AG request legislation 7 years ago. And it was 2016 after the shooting in Mukilteo in which we proposed it, and it was the 2017 session was the first session. And my legislative team has obviously been working very hard on this for all of those 7 years. So in those 7 years, the Legislative Affairs Director has changed a couple times. Currently, it's Joyce Bruce, so please join me in thanking Joyce for her leadership and her team on making this happen. Joyce has a great team. Back in the beginning in 2016, my Legislative Affairs Director was Mike Webb, who is now Chief of Staff in the office. So Mike started this off at the beginning. And after Mike became Chief of Staff, we had a Legislative Affairs Director by the name of Yasmin Trudeau, who filled the role for a while. And then when we weren't getting it through the legislature, we decided we had to get a more unconventional means of trying to get this thing passed. And we thought, let's send to the legislature our Legislative Affairs Director. And so now she's Senator Trudeau and really helped lead the effort. Thank you. So after the shooting in Mukilteo, I had the great privilege to meet with Paul Kramer and others. Paul's here. And Paul's son was shot, thankfully survived that shooting in Mukilteo. And Paul, where are you, just so I know where you're? So Paul's right behind me. So Paul and I met, and I listened to him talk about what the impact of that shooting was on his family and his community. And look, I didn't know anything about what it would be like to go through that experience as a father. So I learned a lot from Paul. And I suspect Paul at that time, he's become quite an activist in this issue. Paul, I suspect you didn't know too much about the ways of the state legislature either, right? So at some point in the conversation, Paul asked, well, what can we do? And I said, well, I'll propose, as agency request legislation, to propose banning the sale of assault weapons in the next session. And I remember so clearly Paul asking, well, what do you think the chances are? And, trying to be direct, I said, look, Paul, it's going to be really, really uphill, really, really uphill. And I just kind of blurted out, maybe without thinking, I said, but you know what? It's probably not going to pass this year, but I said, I promise I'll propose it every year until it passes. And, in those multiple years early on, as Paul and I have talked about, it didn't go anywhere. It wasn't getting out of committee. It wasn't going anywhere. And, Paul, to be honest, there were times when I thought, maybe it's just not going to happen. We've got other things we can work on that have a chance of getting passed. Maybe we just don't do it the third year or the fourth year or the fifth year. But Paul, I remember whenever I thought that way, I would remember my promise I made to Paul. And I tell you that story because there are so many people here who are not elected officials, and the role of elected officials is obviously critical, right? But I think all of us as elected officials appreciate how much, especially this movement, is dependent on grassroots supporters, organizations like the Alliance, Ceasefire, Grandmothers Against Gun Violence, and many others, and individuals who just wrote the letters, showed up at the rallies, did what they could do to support this. And so, Paul, I think you are one of many whose voice, I think, it certainly had a huge impact on me in sticking with this, and I know on many others as well. So to all the grassroots people here today, please give a round of applause from the elected officials to all of you. And so our prime sponsors these last several years, Senator Kuderer, thank you for your steadfast support. And I think my very first call after talking to Paul, I'm pretty sure was to State Representative Strom Peterson, who of course represents Mukilteo. We were looking for a prime sponsor back 7 years ago, and Representative Peterson and I spoke, and he's very passionate about this issue, as you'll hear in a few minutes, and he was quick to offer to be a prime sponsor, and stuck with it every year since, side by side. And so thank you, Strom, for your leadership on that. So the governor mentioned there are a group of bills. One is another agency request legislation about making sure that gun sellers and manufacturers are accountable if they don't follow the rules in selling these weapons. I won't go into the details of that, but David Hackney, the State House, is a prime on the House side, and the next speaker, Jamie Peterson, State Senator, was the prime on the Senate side. And I've known Jamie a long, long time, back to our law firm days, and Jamie's just been, he's just really great to work with. He's thoughtful, he's smart, he knows what he's doing. One thing I've learned, he knows how to get a bill through the legislature, and it's just been a really wonderful partnership as well. The last thing I'll say before turning this to Jamie is that we understand there'll be lawsuits challenging the ban on the sale of assault weapons. My team told me I think one's been filed already, I think. That's to be expected, and that's their right. That's the way our system works. We're a nation of laws, and they have the right to challenge that. I will just remind them and everybody in this room that we have, in the AG's office, we defend all bills passed by the legislature and by the people through the initiative process, and we have defended a number of bills related to common sense gun reform, and our record so far is pretty good against the NRA and against the Second Amendment Foundation. We are undefeated, and we plan to keep that record intact. Thank you so much, everybody, for your support. And now Jamie Peterson.
I want to thank the Attorney General and the Governor both for their leadership, for their willingness to put their reputations and their political capital at work to make these bills happen and to make so many other things happen over the past few years. When I reflect, I was talking with Representative Kagi here a moment ago about what the legislature was like in 2006 when I got here. There were 38 members of the House Democratic Caucus who wrote a letter to Speaker Chop saying, don't bother bringing any gun control bills to the floor because we will vote against them. 6 years later, after Sandy Hook, Speaker Chop and then Senator Frocht and I met with Eric Liu and Nick Hanauer at the founding of the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, and they asked us, what are you going to do? What can you do? And we sort of said, well, gosh, I'm not sure, given the realities of the legislature, that we can do anything. But we'll try. And we tried with the bill that eventually became Initiative 594 after the Alliance for Gun Responsibility brought that to the ballot box. At that time, the conventional wisdom was that support for gun responsibility measures was a mile wide but an inch deep. And the NRA was capable of incredible organizing and would turn out people in Olympia and then would turn out people in elections to make sure that folks who voted in swing districts for these kinds of bills would never come back to these halls. And I think the story of the last 10 years is a complete overturning of that idea. As the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence and the Moms Demand Action and the Alliance for Gun Responsibility built an astonishing coalition of people who have interacted with the voters through a series of initiatives and interacted with the legislature through a series of bills to ensure that we are doing everything that we can and consistently making progress toward reducing gun violence and preventing gun violence in our state. The bill that I was privileged to prime sponsor is one that's very much in line with my general approach to bills in the legislature. It's kind of a background bill that I think will help all of the other legislation work better because it causes the people who are directly involved in the manufacture and sale of firearms to become very interested in enforcing all of the other laws that we have been successful in passing over the last few years. It imposes on them liability for a failure to impose reasonable controls on those firearms. So if you think you're going to sell high-capacity magazines, guess what? Now the Attorney General has a new tool to make sure that you can't do that, or to sell assault weapons if you're a retailer. If you're a manufacturer who's going to target youth with a message about how cool it is to go shoot assault weapons, guess what? You may have some responsibility the next time that there is a mass shooting. We know, as the governor said, that we will never stop all gun violence. But I think as we have grown through the pandemic to have a greater appreciation for what it means to take a public health approach to this problem, to have a wide range of small measures, we know that we are saving lives. And that is the inspiration that I think gives all of us energy to keep doing this work. I am pleased to turn the podium over now to my neighbor in Seattle, Representative Liz Berry, who has been absolutely tireless in advocating for a new policy that we haven't been talking about for 7 years. But this idea that there ought to be a long waiting period, 10 days at least, before somebody is able to purchase a firearm. She came to me in my office and said, "Pretty please, can you help get this through the Senate?" She really is very persistent and effective, and I'm delighted to introduce Liz Berry. Thank you.
First, I want to thank everyone in this room who has made this day possible. So thank you to everyone here, and Governor Inslee, thank you for working with me on my bill that I'm here to talk about today. I ran for office 3 years ago because I was angry, I was heartbroken, I was devastated. I wanted to do something about it. Too many of our friends and neighbors are being killed by gun violence in our communities, and that is unacceptable. I'm the mom of 2 little kids, and it's devastating to me that gun violence is the #1 cause of death for children in our country. I have also lost someone I love to gun violence, Gabe Zimmerman, who was killed in the Tucson shooting. Enough is enough. And just a few years ago, Washington State received a C grade for gun safety measures by the Giffords Law Center. When Governor Inslee signs these bills into law today, our grade will be an A. But I'm here to talk about my bill 1143, which will implement a 10-day waiting period and mandatory safety training for all firearm purchases. The reason this bill is so important is because on January 1st, 2024, our centralized background check system will come online here in Washington, and that means instantaneous background checks for all firearm purchases. We know that this cooling off period is critical, that people who are in crisis, it really helps stop gun violence in these situations. We know that 50% of all suicides are committed by a firearm, and that the safety training is important because it will teach people critical information like safe storage, safe handling, and how to keep guns out of the hands of kids. 39% of firearm owners have never received a firearm safety training. This bill will save lives. I just want to end with this. Kids are marching in the streets, students are marching, young people are demanding that people like us up here, people with power, do something to end gun violence in their communities, in their schools, in their churches, and on their playgrounds. We see you, we hear you, and today we are doing something about it. Thank you. And now my colleague Strom, Representative Strom Peterson, my partner in all things.
Wow, today's the day. See if I make it through this speech. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Attorney General Ferguson. It's been a journey. Paul. So we're standing here today and just reflect on the crowd and those that have been standing with us. We can kind of get to go almost generationally. We have the grandmothers against gun violence who have been steadfast in their commitment to their families and their communities. And the sea of red with Moms Demand Action. Again, this grassroots support that has had my back and the backs of so many others as we did struggle to even get a hearing for some of these bills. But really, most importantly, as Representative Berry noted, are the kids. Pretty much every year I have the honor and opportunity of talking to Mrs. Titus's civics class at Mariner High School. And every year, and they come up with the best questions. But every year the number one question is, what are you going to do about gun violence? Every year. So many years I didn't really have an answer. We're trying. We're working on some little things. Last year I got to give a much bigger answer. We banned the sale of high-capacity magazines, thanks to work again. Bob Ferguson, my seatmate, Senator Leas. But this year, I get to go to that class, stand up, and say, because of you asking me that question, because of you marching in the streets, because of you refusing to go to class, because your friends are dying across the country, Washington State is leading the way. Washington State is banning assault weapons. Washington State is going to drastically reduce suicides and accidental shootings. And Washington State is going to make sure that gun manufacturers are responsible for their actions. This is a day that's been a long time coming, but a day that's here. And I couldn't be prouder to stand again with Governor Inslee, First Lady Inslee. Thank you so much. But with my colleagues who have been at this for so many years, but most of all, with the citizens of Washington who have led the way. And I'm just glad that we were able to follow and make this happen. Thank you all for being here.
Okay, we're here for House Bill 1143. This bill establishes a 10-day waiting period and a safety training requirement for firearm purchases starting January 1st, 2024. Putting a buffer of time between a person in crisis and a firearm can and will be the difference between life and death for others, for their neighbors' children, and for their own families. While training is already required for the purchase or transfer of semi-automatic rifles, this legislation extends that requirement for all firearms. Now, I know we've all been inspired by people, and Liz has done a fantastic job with Senator Leas on this, but how about a round of applause for former Representative Gabby Giffords, who's been an inspiration to the cause of transformation. So we don't have a waiting period necessity for signing a good bill, so I'm signing this bill. So. Congratulations, everyone. Let's smile for the camera here just a second. All right, big smiles. Thanks. Oh, Andrew, you did a good job. Where's Liz? Where are you? Come here. Stand here. Wait, stand here with the picture here. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. All right. Okay, this is House Bill 1240. This bill prohibits the sale, import, distribution, or manufacture of any military-style assault weapon in the state of Washington starting today. I'm happy to say that, today. nice to have friends, I'll tell you that. Individuals who violate this new law can be charged with a gross misdemeanor punishable by up to 364 days in jail and a $5,000 fine. Firearm dealers have 90 days to sell or transfer their existing assault weapon inventory purchased before January 1, 2023. With my signature, we have become the 10th state in the country to adopt an assault weapons ban. And I do want to note that we lead the country in so many ways, and we are leading on this to have 3 bills. I'm not sure any state has ever taken 3 steps on one day that we have had. We know we need to continue this effort on a national basis. And our message and beacon from the state of Washington against the NRA is a national beacon for hope for the whole country. And I want to thank a few other folks who've worked on this for 3 decades. A guy named Bill Clinton, who signed the original ban. A fellow named Joe Biden, who wants to finish the job, which I appreciate. And a friend of mine named Earl Pomeroy, who's a buddy from North Dakota, who I stood next to, and we've cast some of the pivotal votes to ban this in 1994. That was the right vote in 1994, and it's the right law to sign today. I'm very happy about this. We all want to thank Representative Peterson, who is a prime sponsor of this bill. His support has been unwavering. Representative Peterson first introduced the bill in 2017 after the Mukilteo mass shooting. We also want to thank Senator Cooter for great work and Attorney General Bob Ferguson, who's been indefatigable in his effort now for several years. Congratulations to everyone in this step forward. We know we have more work to do, but this is a great thing for the state of Washington. Congratulations. I need another pen. Who's got a pen? I need a pen here. I need 2 pens for this. Okay. Is Trudy around? Trudy, could you join us over here just for a second? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We're here for Senate Bill 5078. This requires firearm industry members to establish and enforce reasonable controls on the sale, distribution, and marketing of their products. We are asking firearm dealers and manufacturers to make sure that they comply with our firearm laws while doing business in Washington state. Simply put, this bill increases the accountability of firearm dealers and manufacturers and holds the industry to reasonable standards going forward, standards that can and will save lives. I want to thank Senator Peterson for his sponsorship and his work on this important bill, as well as the companion bill sponsor, Representative Hackney. I'm signing this with 2 pens. First, one for Jamie. Jamie, congratulations. And the other for a woman, when I first started working with her, she was a mother against gun violence. Now she's a grandmother against violence, Trudy Inslee. So she gets this pen. Congratulations to everybody. Trudy, where are you? Okay, I need it. Here, I need to follow the camera. Okay, let's smile for the camera here. Okay, guys, congratulations to everybody. Enjoy. Thanks, buddy. We're thinking of you and your daughter. What a great act of leadership. Thank you so much. Okay, party safely tonight, okay? Thank you very much. Uh-oh. Can you guys hang out? We're gonna do one big picture here. Okay. One big picture. All right. Gotta show off your orange here. Trudy?
Here too.
Okay, Jim, could you get ready to take one? Just take, you ready? Okay, give me one. Did you get that, Mike?